Hey there, I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of the website techinterview.guide, and I'm here to help people with career advancement and interview preparation. My live stream on Twitch covers topics such as company research, how to build resumes and cover letters, applying for the job, getting through interviews, and what to do during negotiations. I've coached thousands and thousands of people over the years to get jobs at the biggest tech companies in the industry, and I'm here to help you too. The following episode is taken from a longer live stream event and may contain interactions with other people in chat. Check out the end of the episode for more information. Let's get to it. All right, so this is another resume that I had submitted. It's anonymous, and the message that came with it says, I lost my job recently because they wanted me to do more QA engineering at a financial bank and didn't have the drive to deliver. So basically just decoding this a little bit, the person wants to be a developer, and the company wanted to move them into a QA role. And they didn't really want to be a QA engineer. They wanted to be like a full-time software developer. So the company put them on a performance improvement plan, or what we call a PIP. So after they put me on a PIP, I resigned, and I'm spending my time preparing for interviews. I have a friend at a FAANG company, and I want to update my resume to be more appealing to companies like that. So a couple of things that I'd like to offer as a suggestion here. One, never quit your job. If they put you on a performance improvement plan, sometimes that's the company's way of like covering their butt a little bit because they want you to leave. Sometimes moving you into a position that they know you're going to find undesirable so that you resign is a way to save them money, because now they don't have to pay your salary anymore, but they also don't have to pay you any kind of severance because they've let you go. So I typically tell people, if you get put on a performance improvement plan, wait it out. Like, do your best to meet what's in the PIP, but if you're really unhappy there, let them fire you. You have a story to tell. You can just say, like, if someone says, like, why'd you leave that job? You can say, I didn't leave on very good terms because they were trying to move me into a role that I really didn't want to do. They wanted to move me into a full-time QA role. I want to be a full-time developer. And so I spent, a period of 3 months trying to do that kind of work, but I'm not suited for a full-time QA role, and I wasn't happy. And so we parted ways. You don't have to say they fired me, but you can just say I left the company. But I didn't leave on good terms because of that. That's all you need to say. You don't have to go into the full explanation of like, they put me on a PIP and, like I thought it was a bunch of BS and whatever. Like you don't want to badmouth the company at all. You can just say they wanted to move me into a position I didn't want to do. I did my best to try to accommodate that and to try to meet the expectations that they had for me, but it wasn't the kind of job that I wanted to do. And I let them know that there wasn't any other opportunity for that. So we parted ways, and just leave it at that. That's all you really need to explain. So in this person's case, they've been laid off. We can see in the resume here that they left in April 2022. So they've been unemployed now for, if we give them the benefit of the doubt and we say the end of April, then it's been all of May and now we're into June. So it's been maybe 5 weeks that they've been unemployed. That can start to feel like a long time, but at the same time, you need time to kind of ramp up and get ready for interviews and things like that. So in some cases, in some ways, it's good that they've got effort or they've got time to put into full-time effort of finding that next job. Paint Signal says in chat, creative differences. Yeah, that could be another way of putting it, but I would just say like they wanted to move me into a role that I wasn't qualified for. I did my best in that role, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, and so we parted ways. And just leave it at that. I don't think you really need to explain. Well, now, if they press you on and say, did you resign or, were you asked to leave? Then you can say, I was asked to leave the company. And just be honest with them. You don't want to misrepresent yourself at all. So basically what they're hoping to do now is they want to really stand out to a FAANG company at this point. So we'll kind of pick this apart a little bit and kind of see like, how does this stand out? So as with most other resumes, I always recommend like never ever put your geographic location on here. If you're looking for a job in New York, in the Brooklyn area, then you can say you're in Brooklyn, New York, but you don't have to put your full address, and you certainly don't need your zip code on here. I would take that off. They're not going to mail you anything to this address based on your resume. All they need to know is like maybe what time zone you're in if you're going to be like working a remote job. But aside from that, they don't need to know where you live at this stage. Let them find out a little bit later on. Or you can just say, I live in New York. or I live in the New York City area or something like that. Having your email, your phone number on here, those are necessary. If you have a LinkedIn and a GitHub, I would put those on here as well. You just have to be careful about using vertical space here. So the first thing I notice when I kind of zoom out on here, there's a lot of empty space at the top. There's a lot of empty space down here at the bottom. And so I think we could probably work, and these margins like all around the page are really wide. So I would probably find a way to maybe use a little less margin on the sides, and we certainly want to try to get a little bit closer to the top and bottom without feeling like this is a full page cram packed with words. We can still spread things out vertically a little bit, just to give a little more visual appeal on the page, just to see a little bit more about what you've done, what you've worked on, and kind of the skills and so on. So let's zoom in a little bit more here. Languages proficient in, I would take off the word proficient. Just tell me the languages you know. You don't have to tell me what you're proficient in. I will presume proficiency because you've put it on the resume. So the first, the way that I evaluate the skills block is if you put it on your resume, it's fair game for me to ask you questions. If you put it on the resume, that means you know it well enough to interview in that language. If you only kind of know it, then put it at the very end of the list. So for me, this tells me you're a C# developer who knows Java, and you've maybe dabbled in Python. Now, if they're looking for a Python developer, you would put Python at the beginning of the list because you want to look like a Python developer who also knows C# and Java. So this is how you would customize that resume a little bit for the role. So if you're applying for a Python job, you put Python at the beginning. Any of the other tooling that you've used, like any libraries and so on, any Python related libraries, you're going to put at the front of the list. Because when we read these lists, we also read them from left to right in what I call strength order. So this tells me you know C# better than you know Java better than you know Python. Me personally, I don't know what KDB plus Q is. So sometimes you do need to explain a little bit of what these things are. Now, the fact that you tell me that it's a language, but then later on list all these things again as libraries and frameworks doesn't make sense to me. Because C# is not a library or a framework, neither is Java, and I don't know what KDB plus Q is. Now I kind of want to go look it up. So KDB plus Q. Developing with KDB plus and the Q language. So KDB plus is a column-based relational time series database. Okay, so I would list that as a separate technology because it's a database. Q is it's sort of version of SQL, I guess, would be my guess. It's like a query language for that database. But that's not a language. KDB plus is the database itself. Q is its language. So I think you could probably rearrange this stuff a little bit. Again, for tooling, Windows and Linux, most companies aren't going to care which operating systems you use. Most production systems are going to be like a Linux or Unix variant, and they're going to expect that you've got experience with that. If you work on a Mac, you're going to be familiar with Unix-based systems. If you've used Docker, you're probably going to be familiar with Linux. If you develop on a Windows platform, that's fine. They don't care how you get your work done, as long as you can get your work done. The fact that you use Git is fine. If you've also used GitHub, I would probably want to see that somewhere on the top of this page here as well. Jenkins is great. Zephyr is fine. But yeah, I think this libraries and tools, I think we could clean that one up a little bit. All right. But as far as libraries and tools, I would want to know like for C#, you're going to probably be using .NET. For Java, you might be using Spring. For Python, are you using Django or Flask or Fast API? What frameworks or libraries are you using with the languages? So right away, this second point here under skills doesn't tell me anything. You're also putting other headings in here like experience and education. I'd probably want to see one up here explicitly calling out skills. Me personally, I don't like these being centered on the page. I think it's fine if you want to put your contact info centered on the page. Just be careful again about how much vertical space it's taking up. But these headers, I would typically just put on the left. Just keep the formatting simple on this. I would probably shorten the dates on here to be just 3-letter months. So it's just JUL 2019, and then put a space in between the dash on here. Just it'll separate those out a little bit horizontally. Global Markets IT, at some company, that's fine. Developed a website for traders to adjust trading information and ticker data using Java, JavaScript, and ZK framework. So right here, you're telling me that you've worked in JavaScript, but you didn't list it as a skill up here. So to me, that would tell me that you barely did any JavaScript because you weren't confident enough to list it as a skill, as something that you would interview in. You use the ZK framework for the front end. I've never heard of the ZK front end framework, but you also don't list that up here. So again, how much experience did you actually have? Because in this bullet point, you felt it was noteworthy to tell me that you've used that technology, but you don't list any of that technology up here in your skills block. And so to me, this feels like a mismatch of, do you know it well enough to put on the resume or not? If you've dabbled in it, that's okay. But by listing it here, it tells me that I could ask you questions about JavaScript. I could ask you questions about like, oh, tell me about the ZK. Like, how does that differ from like React or an Angular kind of framework? And I'm going to hope that you can answer that kind of question. If you don't have experience in those other frameworks, that's fine. You can say, I've never used React or Angular, so I can't compare them. That's okay. Like you can say that as an answer. That's fine. But if you've used that framework for some period of time, I mean, you were there on that job for almost 3 years. So I would probably have some questions about this. QDB plus Q for the backend. Again, is that a backend framework? I mean, I had to go look up the fact that this was a time series database. If you've used other databases, I would just add like a whole other point up here of like the databases that you've used. Have you used Postgres, MySQL, Mongo? And then you could list this KDB on here as far as like the actual technology that you've used. Designed and developed. And then kind of going back to what I typically tell people about bullet points, like don't make the bullet point so long that it wraps on another line. I think you could probably just put all the technologies as a single bullet point and just say technologies used on the job. Boom, 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 and just list those out. But I don't think you need to like explain all of that in each bullet point this way to where it like ends up wrapping around those lines. You want to try to keep your bullet points relatively short. I like that you're kind of giving me like a user empathy statement here. Like you're telling me why, like who this project was for, as opposed to just, yeah, I worked at some financial thing and I used Java and JavaScript. It's like, well, to do what? So I like that you're telling me here, like what aspect of the business you actually were involved in. I think that actually stands out really nice on a resume. Designed and developed testing frameworks for various services in C# using SpecFlow, MSTest, WCF. List that stuff up above. If you've used them well enough that you can speak to them in a bullet point here, then they should be in that skills block at the top. Set up Jenkins pipelines to automate deployment and testing. That's fine. Again, bullet points don't have to be grammatically correct sentences, and so they don't need to end in a period. I would take the periods off the end of this. Designed and developed testing frameworks for various services. I would take this off and just say I designed and developed testing frameworks in C#, comma, SpecFlow, comma, MSTest, comma, WCF. You don't need the word and. You don't need the word in. You can take a lot of those kinds of things out of there. All right, so the next job you had was as a consultant, and it looked like you were doing that for quite a while. Now, you give me a month that you started. You don't give me a month when it ended. So that looks a little inconsistent. Like, did you do this through the end of 2019? Did it overlap this job? Did you leave this consulting job to take this full-time job? So I would want to see a month of when you ended this. Listen to clients' issues. Well, that's what you do as a consultant. So this becomes redundant. Find solutions concerning setting up VPNs. I would take all of this out. Or just say you were like... engineered solutions using VPNs and Wi-Fi to ease workload on more specialized personnel. Like that's very buzzwordy and doesn't tell me anything of value as far as what you did. You like this right here that I'm highlighting. Solutions, setting up VPNs and connecting to Wi-Fi. That's the only thing of value in this whole sentence. And so I would find a way to reduce that and then explain this a little bit more about like what it is you did as far as like VPNs. Troubleshoot with technology to elevate complex issues. Again, I think you're over explaining a lot of this, and bullet points certainly shouldn't be close to 2 lines long. So troubleshoot with technology and elevate complex issues to the proper specialist using the Salesforce ticketing system. So again, like Salesforce is like capital S. I don't think it's a capital F, but like make sure that you're capitalizing things properly. To add solutions to novel issues to a database that's referenced by other employees. This almost sounds like you built an FAQ or like a knowledge base kind of thing. So I think you could summarize a lot of this and just say like troubleshooting notes added to knowledge base to or you want to you want like your action verb to kind of start at the beginning. Like what was the impact of this? So you could say like improved employee documentation by putting troubleshooting notes in a knowledge base or a company-wide knowledge base or something like that. Because you're telling me a lot of words here without really explaining like what was the impact, what was the benefit of this, how did you make the company better in some way, as opposed to just I did this thing on the job. So these bullet points, you need to give me like some kind of action verb, quantify it if you can, like how many things did you make? Like was it 10, was it 100, like how many of these things, and then what was the impact? Like did people say that, you know, it made it like a drastic improvement on their workflows? You want to explain those kinds of things. Vertically, you're taking up 4 lines of text for this job. I think you could probably break a lot of this stuff down into 4 bullet points that tell me a whole lot more about what you did, how you did, and the impact that it had, as opposed to 2 really long sentences. Give me 4 shorter bullet points explaining a little bit more about like what you did and what that impact was. You got education a little bit less, and then you've got project work under there. So Bachelor of Arts in New York, your major was computer science and Japanese. That's cool. Relevant courses, operating systems, discrete data structures. So, I mean, again, these like relevant courses when it comes to computer science. I mean, if you've got a bachelor's in computer science, I mean, I can kind of presume that you've done data structures and algorithms and operating systems. Like that's kind of a given. If there's something specific about those courses that you've done that are important for my company to know, I would call those out. Like, did you do something with machine learning or AI or something like that that my company is going to care about? Did you do a class about that? Did you do a class about ethics? If my company is involved in ethics and you did it like an ethical hacking class or something like that, put that on here because that's relevant to me. Operating systems, data structures, and algorithms are so generic in nature that it's not worth having on the resume. That's kind of implied as part of being a computer science degree. I don't think that you specifically need to call those out. So for projects, you did independent project. I like that you're calling out like, was this a solo project or a group project? I like that you've got that on there. I think if you've got these up on GitHub or some like Bitbucket or something like that, where I can actually go look at the code, I would be adding links to those. And if it's something that you can actually publish online, give me like a live link of where I can go experience what you've built. That's way more powerful than just letting me know that I once upon a time I worked on a project. It's like, okay, well, you know, I guess I have to believe you because it's on your resume, but if you can put a GitHub link on there, now I can actually see your code and I can see how you built that code. If you give me a website, now I can go experience what you built. And now I know that not only can you code, you can build working applications as well. So it just adds a lot more sort of power and oomph to what you've built here. But again, a lot of these bullet points are really, really long. So let's go through these a little bit. Using Interior API. So API should be caps. To pull income and cash flow statements along with stock ticker data and conducted ratio analysis over time through a JSON library. So JSON is all caps. So through the JSON library, like which JSON library? Which language did you use? Like you don't really tell me anything about the technologies, like the overall technologies of how you built this project. So when you put project work on a resume, here's what I like to see. I like to see the name of the project and whether it was solo or group project, and you've done that. The date, okay, having the date on there is fine. It lets me know that this project was more recent than these other ones. The fact that you graduated in May 2019 means that these were done in your sophomore year, which is fine. So my expectation is probably going to be a little bit lower because you were still learning a lot of things. But I like seeing a user empathy statement right away. Like, what was this project about? Like, what does the end user use this project for? So you're telling me that you're pulling income and cash flow statements, but like, so what does the user actually do with that? You're telling me down here at the very end, meant to be a simple program that's accessible for student financial clubs, okay, that compares financial data of several companies over the time of a year. Okay, so there's your user empathy statement. Users can research company financial data. That's a user empathy statement. So tell me that first. This tells me that as a developer, you care about the end user, that you understand the impact that this has for a user. That's going to stand out way more, especially for this particular person, because they mentioned that they wanted a job at a FAANG company. FAANG companies care a great deal, especially Amazon, about the customer experience. It's all about the customer experience. How do we make that absolutely amazing? Right now, you're not really selling me on, like, I built this for the user to make a really amazing user experience. Other than, down here at the very bottom, it's meant to be a simple program. Well, was it a simple program, or was it meant to be? Because saying that it meant to be, like I meant to do my laundry, the subtext of that is, but I didn't. So I think you do need to be a little bit careful about like how you sort of word things on a resume. So I would start with that user empathy statement. What is this project for? Like, how is the end user going to use this project? From there, then, give me one bullet point of, if it's a solo project, your first bullet point should be like a major theme that you learned about the project. Like, what did you learn about this? You learned about consuming APIs to manipulate financial and stock data. The second bullet point could be like something fun and geeky. The third bullet point should be your tech stack. Show me all the languages, frameworks, libraries, and whatever that you use to accomplish this project. Because right now, I have no idea how you actually built any of this other than this one you did in the Go language, which incidentally, you also don't list as a skill up here. So are you still using Go? Did you only use it for like that one project and then you never touched it again? Again, these things don't really line up. So you want to be really clear about that, especially if you're going to go work at or apply at Google, for example. The fact that you've used their technology is going to stand out to them. So you want that to be really like a lot more prominent. So the first bullet point is, what was a major learning goal of the project? The second bullet point is, tell me something fun and geeky that you did with the data or the libraries, or something really interesting about how you mash this stuff up. And then the third bullet point is just tell me the tech stack that you used. Company sentiment app, use the Scrapey library. So I know that you've used Python for this, to crawl through financial news websites and scrape articles for a straightforward application. So again, like you're using a lot of buzzwordy stuff here that's not going to mean anything to a hiring manager. Scrape articles for a straightforward application to keep students on top of news pertaining to organizations of interest. So your user empathy statement on this is, users can scrape financial news websites to research companies. But research companies for what end? Like to apply for jobs or just to see financial data about a company? And then the first bullet point then is going to be what project, or like what was your main learning goal here? This project taught me how to scrape website data that didn't have an API. Second bullet point, analyzed unorganized data using Bayesian algorithms and natural language processing. And then the third bullet point is like Python, Scrapey, blah, 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 like Beautiful Soup or whatever you use to like pull all this stuff together. And then Discord greeting bot. So contributing again is present tense. So you want to use like past tense for these things. So contributed to the development of a robot using Golang that moderates and replies to moderators. So instead of calling it a robot, I would call it like a chat bot. I think that that's going to be a little more clear in modern terminology as far as what you did. So contributed to the development of, I would say like contributed code to a chatbot, to a Golang based chatbot for moderating replies or something like that. Using the Discord API, the robot tokenizes the messages of users, looks for keywords, sends messages on moderator-only channels detailing the infraction to allow for adequate moderation 24 hours a day. Again, you're using a lot of vertical space here that I think you could break this into multiple bullet points to really get more of the point across of like what it was that you built and what the impact of that was. But if you could also, kind of quantify that a little bit and say like, this was the impact that it had, like it saved moderators a bunch of time, assisted, do you have any stats on how many messages that it contributed, that it did this analysis on, things like that, like moderated 10,000 messages a day or something, or was it like 10 messages a day? Like I would love to see some kind of impact on that. Student activities: acquired foundational knowledge in asset and wealth management, learned about current and future trends in the industry through a semester-long web seminar. So this doesn't feel so much as an activity as it is education. So I would actually list this as education. So it was like a semester-long seminar that you attended. This sounds like kind of a regular sort of class that you attended. I wouldn't list that as an activity. Acquired foundational knowledge in asset and wealth management. I mean, if it was like a wealth management sort of business, like you're learning how to like promote, asset management or whatever to other people to like get them to sign up for something, then that's a little bit different. But if you were a student, then I would not list this as an activity. I would actually list this as part of your education. Overall, though, this feels very strongly like you've got a really solid background. Like to me, reading through this resume, you've got a solid background in like financial systems and looking at like research data and financial data and stock, information and things like that. To really stand out to a FAANG company, though, how is that going to be useful to a FAANG company? Right now, none of those FAANG companies are in. Like they're public companies, and so they are on the stock market, but none of them really build applications for the stock market. And so I think to stand out to a FAANG company, I think you need to tell me a little more of the nitty gritty, like low level stuff that you actually build and the languages and the technologies that you use on a regular basis, and talk about the impact of speed and performance and optimizations and things like that, but the overall user impact of what it was that you built and how that impacted the end user. Like scraping through thousands of websites and the impact that had, or, how long did it take your project to actually go through and like scrape data for a particular company? Did it take milliseconds? Did it take hours? Like how long did that actually take? FAANG companies are going to be caring about those low level details about what you learned and how that's going to be helping their business. So I think your resume needs to promote a lot more of that, as opposed to just, these are some sort of core projects that I worked on. If you really want to stand out and really get an interview with them, you need to explain a whole lot more about the low level aspects of what you built. How big was your code? How fast was your code? How well did it perform? How did you optimize it? How did you maintain it over time to get even faster? What other libraries did you consider? For example, the stuff that you did in Python, could you rewrite that in C# or Go or Java to be even more performant because it's a compiled language as opposed to an interpreted language? Maybe some of those libraries don't exist in those other languages, but there are, is there a way that you could kind of combine those efforts to like speed it up even more? I think that those would be really good ways to sort of stand out to a FAANG company. Thanks for checking that out. I hope that you found it helpful. I always appreciate feedback, so please let me know what you think. I appreciate any subscriptions, so please tell your friends and colleagues about it as well. Check out the website techinterview.guide for more information about when I'm live streaming and all of my free content. Drop by a live stream anytime to ask questions or message me privately, whatever makes you most comfortable. See you next time.